Hi there. My partner and I have been reading, we're studying these Seven Sermons to the Dead by C.G. Jung. And it's the book that's introduced and commentaries written by Stefan Heuler. And we're getting a bit bit sick of these sermons to the dead, if you don't mind me saying. It's there's a lot of hot air and a lot of dancing around the subject going on without actually applying a bit of common sense and a bit of analysis to the actual topic at hand. I know it's supposed to be spiritual writing, so it doesn't have to make sense. But on the other hand, you could just say the secret of life is Hugh or Om or something like that, or Allah Akbar or something. And you could just leave it at that. It doesn't have to be anything, or do da 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 do, as the Sting song has it. The meaning of all life is in those simple words, because it's too complicated or too simple to be expressed in language. But then again, if something is going to be expressed, it's going to be expressed in language, really, or just expressed as a mantra. Anyway, we started chatting about things, and I suppose you could say that these sermons to the dead actually give one food for thought and start you in a conversation. So we're having a conversation about really, the origins of Gnosticism. Where does it originate, philosophically speaking? It seems to me that Gnosticism is based on an argument, which is really that a good God, omnipotent God, an immutable God, couldn't possibly have made this world, which is so evil and imperfect and so mixed in terms of fortune and in terms of good things and bad things happening to good people and good things happening to bad people, and it doesn't seem at all fair, any of it. And this is the whole crux of it. So either God is not wholly good, or God is a mixture of good and evil, or God isn't omnipotent. God is in fact rather weak. This God of love, which is talked about in the New Testament. And that's what it's all based on, because from there you get the idea that maybe that there are two gods, a God of matter and a God of spirit, and the God of spirit is not omniscient, and is about equal in power, or perhaps even slightly less equal than the God of matter, or perhaps one should say that the God of spirit is powerful in the realm of spirit, but it can't do anything much about the God of matter, who is all-powerful in the realm of matter. But of course, the God of spirit does occasionally send the Holy Spirit, send a sort of pseudopodium of itself into a sort of foray into the God of matter's realm, into this realm itself, in order to make or in order to work certain magics, as it might be called, on the soul, which is trapped within matter. And so, and then you get the whole cosmology, because in Gnosticism, I think cosmology is of prime importance, how all this came to be, and what's going to happen to it in the end. How's the story going to go at the end of the chapter, kind of thing, or the end of the book. But I think that and at the second, it ends up in the second sermon saying, all the dead were Christians. I think that we've got to sort of clarify a little bit about the view of God within the religions of the book, that is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Because it's very much based, this is post-Enlightenment, which is sort of post-18th century, and certainly post-20th century with the death of God, and God is either just an archetype or a symbol or some kind of reference point in meditation or contemplation, but not actually real in existence in the Cartesian sense of the word. Anyway, so this medieval, one might say, medieval view of God is very much based on the Oriental potentate, which I've explained before in another video. But I just wanted to sort of make this clear. The thing about it is that, as Sabal says, everything that God sends is welcome, because whatever God decrees, whatever God makes happen, is the good, even if from your point of view it's evil, because it comes from on high, it comes from the high throne. And you can imagine that this is politically based on a potentate, on an Oriental potentate, a tyrant. That everything that the tyrant decrees is good. If the tyrant takes land away from you, it's good. If he gives it to another person, it's good. If he then takes it away from the person that he's just given the land to, that's good as well. And he rules by fiat. He rules by decree and absolute power. And everything that the master, the architect, the god, the tyrant god, the potentate decides is always right. And always best, in the best interests of the entire universe, so to say, or the entire kingdom. And that is what is believed by his subordinates. Now, of course, so his court is very top down. He is the supreme ruler, and and we are the serfs below him. And everything that comes from the high throne is to be welcomed as the good, even if even if it appears to be evil and destructive and horrible and horrific. Now, within this despotic court, there is a layer of intercessory, or there's an intercessionary layer of court officials. For example, the king has a son. The son has a mother. For example, one could say that the principal son has a principal mother, who is the principal wife of the tyrant, who has a harem of wives, of course, and she is the first wife. And these positions in the court are very high. And basically, what you can do as a serf is you can go to the son and you can plead your case with the son. And then the son whispers in the ear of the great potentate that the potentate should think about considering reversing the decision. And on occasion, because it is the son that's talking to him, the great king will reverse his decision and give the land back to you, for example. And if the mother goes to him, she can have a plead for compassion or clemency in his judgment against any one of his subjects. So his subjects have to be right in there with the mother and with the son, basically, and with a couple of other court officials or prophets or high priests that the king listens to. That basically they have the ear of the king. So you've got to be good with certain key members of the court. And one sort of you can extrapolate this to heaven. There's a heavenly court, which is run by an absolute ruler who nevertheless has a son and has a mother of the son, and has various prophets, high priests, certain people who have the ear of God and can intercede on your behalf, which is very much the sort of the old-fashioned Catholic way of looking at things, and indeed it is now. So you can appeal to Mary, Mother of Jesus, and she will appeal on your behalf to God to reverse his decision, so that God will take away your misfortune and replace it with fortune, for example. So it's very much a human-centric idea that the good is whatever is good for humans and for the individual. Well, and now, of course, fast forward to the 18th century when you have this idea of human rights, okay, rights of women, rights of children. And of course, you see in the medieval idea of the celestial court, ruled by the absolute ruler, you don't have any rights. Okay, you are the chattel. You are owned. You are ruled over by the absolute king, and you don't have any rights whatsoever. Um, I mean, anything can be done to you. Anything will be done to you, and you just have to grin and bear it. But post-Enlightenment, 18th century in the West, the idea is that we have human rights, and therefore the king, the wise judge, has to judge between the rights of one individual and another, or between the rights of a group of individuals and another group of individuals. And so we have moral dilemmas, and we have to balance the rights of one group against another. And it's very much like you have to go to court and argue for your rights, and that your rights have been violated or your rights have been not represented properly in some way or another. And so the idea of God now is that God has to be a judge between the rights of one individual against another. But more than that, the right has to take into account the rights of his devotees or the rights of the individual on one hand, and he also has to give unconditional love to you because you have a right to that unconditional love as one of his children, as one of his favorites. And this, I think, is a slightly nuanced, well, there's a slightly nuanced difference between seeing God as a source of unconditional love and a respecter of rights on one hand, and this idea of God as being the absolute ruler and having your best interests at heart, no matter what judgment he sends against you or what favour he gives you or what boon he gives you, you see. So anyway, Gnosticism arises from the idea that God is a source of unconditional love and wise judgment on one hand, but the Demiurge is the judgmental, tyrannical, absolute ruler of this earth, and you jolly well have to take whatever you're given from the Demiurge, and the Demiurge has the soul of man trapped in this world, to take whatever judgment the Demiurge metes out. And so the soul has to escape from this world by some means or another, and go and enter into the realm of the true God, who is a source of unconditional love, and respects your right to have that unconditional love, simply because you are you are soul, or you are of the same stuff as God, the same spirit. So soul, Holy Spirit, God are one, in one stuff, homoousios, you see, the one stuff, the one substance, and therefore, so you see that this vision of God Gnostic vision of God is very different from the old vision of God. Well, of course, it's still around in Islam because Islam means submission to God. So, alhamdulillah, is by the will of God. Not only do you say that before you get on a train, alhamdulillah, you say it if your child dies of plague, you say, well, it's the will of God. And it's the will of God basically that I should have my child die. And you don't question it, you submit to God's will, and God's will is sort of beyond good and evil. Because if we're judging good and evil by our own maybe egocentric or human-centric criteria, then God doesn't take any notice of that. So indeed, bad things happen to good people, and indeed good things happen to bad people. And it's the will of God, and God's will is beyond your idea of good and evil. Well, you don't know really what good and evil are, but God does, you see. So you have to grin and bear it. So this is not acceptable to Gnostics, especially to modern Gnostics who have a sort of liberal idea of God, as respecting human rights and respecting your desire for self-actualization, respecting your right to live without fear and pain and anguish and grief and all that. And indeed, there is a world. Well, this world does not respect those things, which is why it's an evil world, and yet there is a world beyond that, again, which does respect those things. Well, I know a lot of you are going to say, a lot of Christians are going to retort to this, that this misunderstands Christianity altogether because we are in this mess because we have disobeyed God. Adam and Eve disobeyed God. But one day man and God will be reconciled through Christ, and the New Jerusalem will be a place where there will be unconditional love, and where there'll be no need for the good people to have bad things happen to them, and the bad people have good things happen to them, because everything will be in a twinkling of an eye transformed and redeemed, and all matter and spirit will be reconciled, and we will be bodily born again in spirit. Well, not in spirit, but in actual, we have new bodies given to us, incorruptible bodies, and these will continue forever in this New Jerusalem, which would be obviously a perfect place of justice and purity and beauty and all the Platonic ideas of absolutes that he talked about: absolute justice, absolute goodness, absolute beauty. Without good and bad being present. Well, just good itself, really, and all the bad will be burnt away, obviously. So I suppose there are these nuances of theology which I suppose have to be taken into account. But I think a lot of people are not really very interested in theology, actually, to be perfectly honest. They are basically of people who are religious nowadays. Basically, are of the mind that you just have to put up with it. That God knows best. Okay, and you have to put up with the judgments of God in all matters. Apart from if you're a Calvinist, of course, which is even more complicated. But you can make your own destiny as far as you can, but the rest of it's up to God's will. There's something psychologically satisfying, I suppose, in accepting God's will totally and saying alhamdulillah before you do anything, before you get on a bus, before you go into business. You act, but the consequences of your actions are up to the will of God, and nothing else, and nobody else. And even if you do, I don't know, even if you do magics, the magic is up to the will of God as well, whether it's going to succeed or not. Not up to you. You have no will. You have no say in the matter. As you say, when you talk about all this, one gets into right old Gorgon's knot over all this, really. And I suppose what I've been saying, I hope makes a bit of sense. But I think that Gnosticism is a logical religion, which does arise from both a philosophical argument and then from a certain view of cosmology, as revealed to Gnostics through vision or trance or some transcendental experience, the sort of what I call the keyhole effect, where you look through the keyhole into another reality, apart from this one, a better reality than this one for sure, a reality that makes more sense, because it's a reality where good things happen to good people. And bad things happen to bad people. Well, the bad people aren't going to even be there. Or the bad people are going to be transformed into good people, in which case good things will happen to everybody, regardless of what they were before they were transformed, which is kind of has a alchemical connotation to it, I suppose. Anyway, I don't know if this helps at all. As I say, it all rose from one of the Sermons to the Dead by C.G. Jung, which basically, I suppose, acts as a kind of gadfly, or a sort of a kind of a pointy stick, and it'll stick in you, and you'll say, I hate this sermon, it's rubbish, rubbish. But the effect of this so-called rubbishy sermon, in quotation marks, is to make you think, and to make you think, bring up your own ideas, and to contemplate God, reality in your own way, which perhaps was the whole point of the Sermons to the Dead, in fact, as a kind of sort of Zen way of teaching. Is you say, I don't understand a word of this, and this is all dancing around the subject, and I hate it. It's all rubbish, and I'm going to come up with my own theory, which is perhaps what CGG wants you to do. He wants you to come up with your own creative theory about Gnosticism, because after all, Gnosticism is based on the individual, and not based on dogma, or Kant or creed. You sort of, you are encouraged really to come up with your own theories and your own cosmology, based either on your rational thought, or on vision and dream, or on a little bit of both, really. So anyway, I hope this presents Gnosticism in an interesting light, at least, and you can sort of run with it as far as you want, basically, or drop it like a hot potato. It's sort of up to you, really. I know, poor doggy, he's whining, he wants to go for his walk.